What
Right.
was the process of writing this EP?
It was great. I was kind of going to my producer a lot just in general. But I was kind of in a grieving period. Because not to be like personal necessarily, but there was a lot of stuff going on at home the house I lived in.
Yeah.
My roommate, her best friend had passed.
Oh, yeah.
And I was trying to process it all.
Yeah.
And I was like barely staying alive at that point, and it was really, really, it was a lot, but I was really, really, really lucky to have my producer to be such like an emotional rock for me.
Yeah.
I knew I wanted to write about it, especially like after part 1 and everything. So it was kind of like I would go to his house a lot, and he was like, I kind of came up with something a little grungy, and I was like, oh, okay. And so he came up with that like chord progression, and I was like, I'm obsessed. Let's do it. And so I started writing that immediately, and we kind of wrote that in like about 30 minutes to an hour, maybe. So yeah.
That's amazing.
Thanks.
So yeah, this is part 2.
Yeah.
And why did you decide to break up this collection of songs? 'Cause I think each EP, if I remember correctly, has 4 songs.
3 songs.
3 songs. Okay, so each has 3. So you could have had a full album of like 6 or so songs, but you decided to cut it in half. Like, what was your thought process behind that doing it in 2 different parts?
They're 2 completely different entities.
Yeah.
So, and they're 2 completely different ideas. One is about processing love.
Yeah.
And one is about processing grief and processing that really, really, really difficult time. And also music, like sonically, they're completely different. And I was just like, they don't necessarily make sense all together on a project. So that's why I just kind of wanted to be like, okay. And also to be a little bit easily digestible for like new listeners and everything.
Yeah.
So I'm not like, oh, I'm releasing this like 10 plus song thing that, especially when I've only released like a couple singles in the past. So
did you have specific, like the part 1 is about processing love and heartbreak?
Yeah.
And then this one's about processing
like grief.
Grief.
Yeah. So it's
Did
kind
you
of like,
did you have like think through production differently for each one?
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, I think I was still in part 1, I was still figuring out what I wanted to like sonically who I was. I mean, it still sounds like me, I guess, but part 2 is like where I really started leaning in to indie rock and shoegaze almost.
Yeah.
And that kind of like, I think that's where that's why I was like, I knew I did need to break it up into 2 processes. And also like these are 2 like different parts, and these are completely like different sounds of mine. So I think this was just like, it just made more sense that way.
Yeah. And from these part 1 and part 2, what do you want your listeners to kind of get from it? Like, what is your hope that they get from listening to your music?
I hope they find some kind of comfort, I guess, you know? And this was just like me like processing as much as I could, and I wanted to share because I like to share my thoughts through that way. And so I hope they find some kind of comfort, whether it's through the heartbreak they're going through or whether it's through like the grief that they're going through, and especially with like I don't know anything about anything that specifically came from that really, really because my friend had passed. All I could say to her, all I thought was, I don't know anything about anything. I don't know what to say. It was hard to see somebody lose somebody in real time.
Yeah.
And I hope that they can find comfort in the fact of like, especially with that, they're at a loss for words.
Yeah.
You know.